So far we have finished the majority of the features needed for this OTL, if not all of them, but I still don't like the workflow where we type in the loop attribute and then the fracture name, okay? And also I'm not happy with the way we're specifying whether we're doing it for the first time or for a different level. And I want to first make this automated so that whenever we just have to input the attribute that we need to use to do the fracturing. We don't care about this, okay? Because every time we make this node, so every time we specify this value, we just have to specify the second one to be this guy plus 1, okay? So we're just incrementing this by plus 1. And same here, we type in this guy and then we increment it by plus 1. So I want to make this automated so that we only specify the input that we want to use to loop over, and this makes more sense for us. So we just have to specify the attribute here, and under the hood we want to create a new attribute that has the proper increment on it. And later, we'll do it in the next video, I want to remove this guy completely and have it handled under the hood. So if there is an input, if we give an attribute here, we want to use that. If that attribute is empty or doesn't exist, we want to treat it as a base level, and that's the case. If we don't have any center ID or any attribute per block, that means the geometry has not been fractured yet. Okay, so that's the condition, and we'll do that in the next video. But for now, I want to show you guys how we can create this attribute name and also create the attribute name. So if we take a look at the text itself, let's do Python. So my string is equal center ID 1. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to separate the center ID from 1. Okay, we want to separate the strings from digits, and then I'm just gonna write the steps here, and then we want to take those digits and increment them by 1. So let's say we find the digit number to be 2, we add plus 1, and that's our result. It's going to be equal to 3. Then we separate the center ID, which is the strings only. We separate this guy into 2 entities, okay? So center ID, we want to separate that so that it equals to this. Center ID plus integer. And then we want to swap this integer guy with a new value. And this way we will get a text that is equal to the first part, and then we join it with an integer of 2, or whatever new increment is, and that's going to give us our text center ID 2 if we join both of them. And we want to do all of this in Vex so that we can put it in the compile block or inside the nodes inside the stream without having to worry about it. So let's take a look here, and I have some points here. I'm going to first of all create the attribute. So I at center ID equal center ID 2 is equal at ptnum. So this is my starting point. What I want to do now is I want to create an attribute called center ID 3. Okay, so that's what we want to do, and to do that we have to first separate these two guys. And to do this, I'm going to create another attribute wrangle, and let's test this with the sorry, I'm gonna test this with a string. So string test is equal center ID 2. So that's my string. And if we take a look at the documentations, there is a function called opdigits. And this is generally something that we use with groups or the upper level nodes, but it's actually a vex function. And it returns the integer value of the last sequence of digits of a string, which is exactly what we want. So if you start copying node, for example, Houdini will add 1, 2, 3, 4, and numbers them. And that's how, and it knows the numbering, it figures out the numbering using this opdigits, and it does something under the hood like what we're going to do. So let's take a look at this function. It says opdigits, and you give it a string, and it returns the this number. Okay, so let's try that, and let's call this int digit, and it's equal to digits of my test, which is the string here. So let's take a look, and I'm not seeing the attribute for some reason. Sorry, we're not adding it. So let's do this. I add digit, and there we go. The digit is 2, which is this guy. So now we have that, and then we want to create the new digit. So I at new digit is equal add digit plus 1. So we want to increment that. Let's take a look. So that's 3, and we want to create the new name. So we want to get this guy, the center ID, and then replace the 2 by 3. So what we can do is we can use a strip function which replaces a specific string in the text, and it works this way. Actually, let's take a look at the docs. So strip leading and trailing white space from a string. It says that, but it does more than that. You can specify the actual white space value or the actual string for that. And in this case, we're going to specify 2. So that's on the right side, it's going to remove that. So string strip. I want to strip the test from the digit. Okay. Let's make sure we append an I to it. Make sure it's treated as an integer, and then let's add this as a test, or let's call it new name, so we can see the value here. Okay. Well, it's giving us an error saying warning encountered during vex compile. Matching function for a string is string int. Candidates are string, and basically this is an int. So what we need to do is we need to convert this into a string. We need to convert an integer into a string, and the function for that is I to A. Convert an integer to a string. So I to A. A stands for ASCII, and now it's working, and the new name is called center ID, which is this guy but has no digit. Okay, so the last thing is we want to append the new guy, this guy. And to do that, I'm going to simply use an add, and we want to convert it into a string, because this is an int and everything has to be a string in this case. So this is the raw text, it's this part, and then we're going to convert this into a string and use that. So at, and there we go. That's the new name. And so instead of specifying it here, we're going to hide this. We're going to remove this guy and drive this name from this guy using that vex code. So let's do this. Let's copy what we did here. Okay, and let's dive inside the node. And this is the scatter. And the attribute name, let me verify something. Yeah, so the attribute name doesn't exist yet, so we want to create or provide that in the attributes as a point attribute and then read it inside this node. So here we're specifying the attribute name. Remember, we're creating the attribute inside the compiled block by providing it from the upper level. This is where it's coming from. So instead of providing it here, we want to find this name using a point attribute as a string point attribute, and we want to simply read that and use it as an attribute name. And we want to do it here. So this is my input. If we middle click, we should have a center ID attribute. Sorry, we don't. Yeah. So we're going to take this name here and generate this guy. So let's do this. Let's first create an attribute wrangle. Okay. And let's paste the code that we did. And right now we're going to hard code this, and later in a bit we're going to change it so that it's linked to this guy. Okay. So let's keep everything the way it is. And now we have a new name. And I'm going to convert all these guys into local variables because I don't need them anymore. So int digit. And here I'm going to remove this. And I'm going to remove this. So we have new name. And we're going to call it new attribute name. Just to be clear. And it's going to be digit +1. Okay. So new attribute name. And it contains a value of center ID 3, and that's what we are going to replace this guy with, so that we don't have to rely at the upper level. So here simply it's going to be s at new attribute name, and I'm going to comment this part out. If we take a look at these guys, we should have the new guy. Looks like it's not working. Okay, let's take a look at the compiled block. Maybe that's why. Okay, so instead of doing this, I'm gonna fetch the oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't connect the node, that's why. So here we have that, let's take a look. Yep, center ID 3, and there we go. We got a new attribute created on the fly. So we didn't provide anything except the attribute for this. Okay, it's not being used, this guy now is not used anymore. And this part here, I'm gonna delete. I don't need anymore, and I'm not going to use I don't have to create a new temp attribute. I'm going to plug this attribute directly into the attribute name and delete this completely. Okay, so the next part where we need this, let me restore it. The next part where we need this is when we want to copy this attribute to the primitives, to the pieces. Okay, and right now we have to specify that attribute and it's driven by the upper level. So instead of that, I'm just going to say a star and this, and I'm going to copy everything. Okay, all the points. But this is going to include my new attribute name, which I don't need. It's a temp thing, and I'm going to use it attribute delete and delete that guy. And this is going to leave me with just the new guy, center ID 3. Okay, and there we go. Let's take a look at the upper level. Center ID 3, center ID 3, and I can actually remove this now completely, and it's going to work. And let's edit the parameter interface and hide this for now. Cool. So that, And I don't need this separator. Let's put it invisible. Okay, so let me check. So there's that working. I don't need this as well, but that's fine. We can keep it for now. And the last part is this. Okay, so right now we're still hard coding that, and I don't want that. I want it to be dynamic. So instead of calling it test, I'm going to call it attrib name. And then I want to create an external attribute, and it's a string attribute. I'm going to call it attrib name. Okay, and then all we have to do is copy this guy. Sorry, not this guy. The loop attribute, and that's what's being used in the for each loop. So I'm going to copy that from there, and then paste it here. Copy this guy, paste relative reference. I do that just to get the text. Okay. And this I don't need, I believe. I do. Okay, so that should give me center ID 2. And let's see why this is not working. Ah, yes, sorry. This needs to be replaced. And the new name, the new attribute name that we're going to create is center ID 3. We can do the creation at the upper level and remove it from here, but I don't want that. I want the creation and the setting to be the same because we're not going to change anything. We're not going to save anything. So here we're generating the name of the attribute. We're not creating the attribute, just to be clear. Okay, there is no center ID or anything, just an information about the string, the name of the attribute that we want to create, that then gets used with these two guys and it gets copied to the primitives. And if we go up, there we go. Now let's copy this one more time. And let's call this, I want to loop over attribute center ID 3. Set this to 10. I'm going to change that to 3. And we should get center ID 4. And there we go. We have it. And here that's center ID 3. That's fine. And then 4. Let's increase this to 40. Yep. So that's 3. That's 4. And you can see the difference. And now we can keep doing this, and it's easier. We don't have to generate this. We could have done this in a more complex way by generating the attribute in here in the UI using Python or HScript, but I thought Vex is more useful, and this is probably going to be helpful for you guys at some other in some other scenarios. So it's not just for destruction, or it's not limited to destruction. We're just getting better in Vex and Houdini overall. So the next thing is this guy. We want to do something about this, and we're gonna take a look at that in the next video. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in a bit.